Welcome, and welcome to this afternoon, at least here in Denmark, session about building cybersecure cloud infrastructure with validated digital identities. So yeah, welcome everyone. Welcome this afternoon. It's 2 o'clock here in Copenhagen. I don't know from where in the world you're looking and listening to this session today. I'm very happy that I have a chance here to bring you a story from Denmark about how we're using validated identities. So let's get started. I will just give you a brief introduction on who I am and why I am speaking to you today. So first of all, I'm Bjarke Erling. I'm a member of the National Danish Cybersecurity Council. I was also prior co-chair of this council, and very shortly the council consists of 20 members. 10 people come from the public society, 10 people come from the private sector, and the term of being chair of this council is a co-chair that you do together with the government, is a term that you have for 2 years. So I had that 2-year term, and now I'm a member of the council. I'm also a member of the Danish IT Business Association, an association that consists of something like 800 Danish IT companies. And these companies are all IT security. Of course not everyone is IT security, but there are many companies also related with IT security and working with IT security, obviously. I'm a member of the board of the very new certification program that's named DSeal, and it's actually one of the world's first certification programs. It's the purpose of the DSeal is to make sure that typically customers of any kind of, let's say, a fitness chain, they can make sure they can be trusted that the company in which they provide the data to is also acting in responsible and cybersecure manner. And finally, I'm a group director of the IT security software company Liga, in which also is facilitating this presentation here today. So with that, I would just say welcome everyone, and I'm very happy that I have a chance here to present my opinion and my views on how we can make cloud secure using validated identities. The question today is important and actually quite very important. So I very often say that if we don't act, others will act on our behalf but against our interest. And by that, what I mean is that the thing is that it's very easy for many people just to lean back and say, okay, we will just hope that the problem will go away. It is not going away. It's actually just increasing and more worse. That's our issue. And that's my point here, that everyone that is on the, I would say, the wrong side of history, all those people out there, they are acting, they're doing stuff. They're working every day to make our life more complicated and steal our data, etc., etc. I think that's my point here. If we do not act, if we don't kind of make the moves, others will do that. And why is that? Why is that? There's a challenge. It's actually a huge challenge. So looking at the numbers that you just see here on the screen, 80% of all breaches is related to passwords. 80%. That's a very big number. So that's an issue. We need to do something about how we authenticate people to our IT systems, because that's our major weak link right now. We need to work ourselves out of that problem. I will come with some suggestions, some explanations to how I think this can be achieved. It might not be the complete picture, but at least it's a part of that solution. Also, which I think is quite scary, is what Forbes believes are the cost of damage cost predicted in 2031 for the ransomware attacks, $265 billion. I think it's a massive amount of money lost on something we can actually try to do something with. That's the challenge, that's a task that we have. And finally, I think this number here, 1 out of 8, are the ones that can't even identify themselves. We don't know exactly how many is able to do that fully digital. I doubt that it's not that many. At least here in Europe, we have some people. In Denmark, there's a lot. We'll come to that. But I'm afraid that looking at the requirement and the level of digitization going around the world, it's a very needed area to improve. So with that, I just said, kind of established now, there's an issue. There's also some consequences if we do not act. So let's have a look on what is available right now. What can we who do we actually trust currently? I think this is what's being drawn now on the screen. Well, classic throughout multiple decades, we've been trusting internal identities in organizations. So they, it can be Micro Focus eDirectory, it can be Microsoft Active Directory, it could be other directory services. Typically internal users set up in a central repository, and we trust that as just one source. The problem with that identity is that it's not well shared. I wouldn't trust someone saying, hey, I'm establishing company A down the road, so you should trust me. It wouldn't work. Well, it works internally, as long as the maintenance and the security around the internal directory is safeguarded. Then maybe a little bit better, the cloud identity. In this case here, social media, email services, other cloud services. There are multiple out there already. Actually, there are hundreds. The problem here, or the challenge there, are these services are not, the validation process, the vetting process of who the user are. We all know the discussions from social media. Are this a fake account? Is it a real account? Can I trust the person? Etc., etc. That's also a challenge because there are no generic rules, there are no generic systems for how we make sure that this person is the person. And I think we also have seen throughout the years now some of the challenges, especially on the social media, but also in other situations. Is this actually a genuine account? Is that a genuine person? Or is that someone that is a fraud trying to steal whatever they try to steal? Lastly, there are these kind of new, let's just say kids on the block. That's the latest arrival to this scene. These are the EID, the legal binding identities. These are the new ones. And this all depends on where in the world now you're listening and looking into this session. For people like me here in Denmark, I have a strong, well-established identity that I can use digital. That's a legal binding. It's by law made sure that when I sign a mortgage or when I do something on my behalf using my digital identity, that one is actually a binding identity. And the examples here mentioned just in yellow, EID, passport, national ID card. There are multiple ways of identifying yourself with a legal binding identity. I think the last one here are the one that we want to focus on. Actually, focusing is key in here. We worked in Liga with the German analytic company Kupping & Kohl, and they are working on the trusted EID, trusted validation, trusted identities, reusable identities. And the text here says, by compelling a way to enable business to continue smoothly while adding additional security to the onboarding and lifecycle management of identities is to leverage a network of trusted identities. By utilizing the EIDAS framework, that's the European kind of law, the basis of how the EID services are implementing across the 27 member states in Europe. That is already in place and operationalizing it for the private sector use. Organizations can pull from a pool of verified identities when onboarding, validating that the identity data of the employee, contractor, partner, etc. is active and issued by the correct source and enrolls strong authentication tokens for continued use. So that's the idea in the report. That's also what Kupping & Kohl sees now as a market opportunity for many, every one of you that might work in whatever service you're doing, but utilizing these identities in ways to make your own internal processes and systems more secure. So how can this look? How does it actually look when we look at that from a point of view here in Denmark, the blueprint for validated digital identities? What we have in Denmark is what we call the Danish EID. It's named MitID. This EID has been been in production and in use by a broad numbers of people since 2003. It's actually nearly now, next year is a 20-year anniversary. The important thing is, and the reasoning for the success of this EID is that this is a low cost. It's actually free of charge for the citizens, and businesses can use the similar system in various ways for a very low cost. It's attractive for the businesses. The EID is, as I said, for both citizens and for businesses. I will come also to how this is put together, why it's a success in Denmark. It's an EID for citizens that is more than 15 years old. So when you turn 15, you automatically get assigned an EID. You can actually get it if you're a little bit younger in special cases. It's also for employees, public authorities and businesses. So it is used very widely. There are multiple use cases. I will come to some of those in a few minutes. So they are used for both authentication and for qualified digital signing. But also for compliance. I mentioned the IDAS regulation just before, and this is some of part of the new things that comes in the next generation of the EID is the compliance towards the level substantial, and also coming next year the level high. And for those of you that are in the US, you would also know that the US NIST is working in a similar compliance framework. And yes, it is being used 1.14 billion times in the last 12 months. That's quite a lot for a population of only 6 million people. And actually there are 5.4 million active users using the service. So you can more or less say, the remaining people are the minors that do not have, the kids that don't have a EID, obviously. You would not do that for someone that is only, let's say, 3 years old. It wouldn't make sense. So it is a massive success and has been a huge advantage for many people. In the presentation here today, I also offer you the opportunity to ask questions. So you can put the questions in the questions section of the BrightTalk webpage, and I will try to answer as many as possible within the time frame of the presentation. So, what have we done in Denmark? I said this was the blueprint. So let's just have a very brief look on how it's actually looking kind of in the past, the second generation. Well, it did function very well. It was not future-proof. So what it happened there is that you set a private company to run all the EID services. That's the Nets. That's the one in the blue one in the middle. So there were private sector companies, also service providers using it for their purposes, mainly banks and insurance companies, but mainly the financial sector. This is the main, I would say, success factor for why the Danish EID has been successful. Is because the government and the financial sector has been able to work together on one EID solution. So I'm, as a citizen, can use my EID in both the case where this is for my banking purposes or maybe my insurance, but also for all the services that is related to me from the public point of view. And that's exactly what you see on the screen here. Public sector, and the public sector has their own IDP and the services and all the service connected to that. So what do they do now? How have we kind of evolved into the next generation, the third generation here? That one there has what is now named MitID. The old one was named NemID, so you could say it was EasyID, and now it's more or less saying my ID. The architecture today is that you have a core that's run and owned by the government. So, like the government also are the one that issues passport, it also issues now digital identities. Around the core of the MitID, you have various brokers. Those are the ones that only have access into the core of the authentication system. So they're kind of a protecting layer. This layer, there are, as you can see, bank brokers, public, that's the NEM login broker, that's a public broker, but also other brokers, typically private companies. So we have And in Liga, we work together with companies like Signicate or Crypto. Some of you might know these. Some of you might not know, but then at least I can recommend going and visit these companies. All of these brokers, they are also then signs up with service providers that are utilizing access to the core network. That's the model now, which is more flexible and so also more practical and more secure in various ways. So that was one thing. That was kind of the architectural model, the tech model. Now also means of identification. How do you actually authenticate? So at least all users must have one authentication method. I think the good thing now with the new system is that you can have multiple authentication methods. Obviously, I think it would be no surprise to any that there's an app. And there's an enrollment process. You can do various things with the app. I can come back and answer questions on how this works. But also you have kind of I would call it the old tractor, the MiD-ID code display. So why do we have a code display? I think the main business case here is for people that do not necessarily have a smartphone. As I said, this is a national service, and this service has to be very horizontal. It has to cover everyone in the society, and not everyone want to have a smartphone. Some people just want to have maybe an old Nokia phone or for other reasons. Maybe they just want to have the MiD-ID code display as a backup service. If they lose their phone, they don't want to lose their access, so they have two ways of authenticating. You also have a chip solution based on the FIDO. Sorry, not the U2F protocol. It's for those that want to do that, they don't want to have username, they don't want to have the code display, they can get the chip version as an alternative. And finally, also you have a code reader. That is for people with typically with some, they can be visually impaired, or for other reasoning have an advantage of that the code can be read from the display and for people with these needs. So it's very horizontal. So those were kind of the introduction, now the blueprint of how we work in Denmark. So now the next question comes. And not just because of, keep in mind, I'm just using the Danish example, but there are eID projects now going on across all of Europe and also many other places in the world that I'm aware of. I'm not even aware of all of them, but there are a lot of them. Some of those based on smart cards, others are based on mobile phones, etc., etc. There are many. So can this be used as a foundation of our cloud infrastructure? Can that be an advantage when you have a cloud system? Let's have a look just at the use cases that we have now here in Denmark. Public tax and VAT systems reporting, so as a company can access these systems and report the needed numbers and pay my taxes, etc., and pay my VAT. I can access some financial system. It a little bit depends. There could be, for some reasoning, other security. I think it will change now, especially now with the new MiD-ID solution coming. Public mail system, it's also a speciality that we have in Denmark. We receive, companies from the public receive their letters, their mail digital, and fetch that digital. Also mail encryption is an option, digital signing of all sources of documents, and much, much more. And what is coming? What is coming? I think this is where this really becomes interesting and relevant when you think about validated identities, cloud services, eID onboarding. You might have a service where you want to have onboarded, hundreds of thousands of users, but you also want to make sure that you don't have fraud, so you want to make that service process onboarding that easily and safely. So eID, I think that's a big thing. I think for some people know your customer KYC. Think about that as a KYX. Onboarding, whatever. Password reset, I think that's more simple, but it's still, I even mentioned passwords, but at least provide people a way to make a secure way of resetting their access code into your network and systems. And then, which I also think is quite interesting, imagining that you could actually use an external eID to authenticate to a business system, either as an internal or external user. When I'm a citizen, I have multiple and more use cases. tax systems, legal systems, financial systems, healthcare systems, educational systems, and much, much more. Actually, something like 2,000 or more IT systems is now connected to this service. So how would it look? How does it look when you just do a, let's say, this EID onboarding enrollment? This is just an example that you see on the screen now. And the validated identity with EID, you see the way it works is that the user gets a text message. They log into the service. They authenticate with their EID, this MidID, and they set a new password. And you will see the animation here will go on now until I stop it. So it's an animated GIF, but it shows you exactly how it works. I think in reality it will be a little bit slower, but more or less that's the functionality. So from a customer point of view or a user friendliness point of view, this can be done very simple. And I think that's the advantage, that we know there's nothing about shipping people a default email with something or shipping them a default username or sending them even with mail. I spoke to some universities on that case. They had to send out a letter, a physical letter in advance to the new students, explain them what are their username and default password. All that can be taken away. So onboarding, that's just a simple example here. So let's maybe just think a little bit ahead. What you see here is my LinkedIn page. I think many of you probably do have a LinkedIn page. Many of you has also seen or tried that you get someone that want to connect to you and you're looking at that account and saying, is that a real person or is that who the heck is that? I had that incident just actually a month ago. I was wondering and I was looking strange, this account. The image was a little bit too polished. There were no contributions. There was nothing happening, but there were, So then I started search for the image, and I figured out, okay, that image was a fashion photography taken by someone in Europe, and it has nothing to do with that account. So that was obviously something that didn't exist. That was just a fraud. But imagining that this account, like we know, well, there's a debate right now on Twitter, but a validated account on LinkedIn, what would that do if LinkedIn could validate the user saying, okay, we want to make sure that Bjarke is actually the right account. And we use a service where we know exactly that can only happen if this process has been run. We do have that. We have an example. Of course, for you that are non-Danish speakers, you would have difficulty reading what it says right here, but I think you will get the point. This is eBay. This is actually the Danish subsidiary of eBay. It's named DBA. It's been around for, 40 years. It's been here since I remember when I was a kid. We had a paper version of the same service. You are selling and buying, you're selling used goods for whatever purposes. In this case, an electrical motor, and that for the price of 700 kroners, which more or less is roughly, depending on exchange rate, let's say $100. But what is important is that when you see the small yellow encirclement saying NemID validated, you remember from just before, the Danish system were NemID. Now it's MidID. So this account, this seller, this guy named Fleming, he has actually entered his own NemID service and validated his account. So the trust that is into that seller is higher than from an account that has not been validated, because I don't want to buy stolen goods, or I don't want to buy something that doesn't exist, or all that kind of stuff. That's solved there. It's actually a very simple use case, but I think it's turned out now for more than, a decade or more. It's been very successful for DBA to use these validation. And when I buy stuff there, and I think all Danes do, because sometimes you would have to sell something, or sometimes you're just looking for buying some stuff that you need for whatever you need it. Then you would typically be looking for people that has the right NemID validation. And let's have a look. What could be the use cases? I think when you see all that list coming up here, student accounts, telco, email, streaming, loyalty programs, car rentals, public libraries, tax declaration, stock trading. Good Lord, that's a lot. And those are, I don't know how many, 30 there. I guess if you imagine, that can be whatever you can possibly imagine. So all of those are possible use cases we can pick up and use in the services that we're providing, in a way also to make our world and the digital living more safe and secure and trusted. I think that's the whole discussion today. It's making our digital environment more reliable. It's also robust and resilient, protecting it from these ongoing attacks. And what do this, in this case also analytics and analysts say, that's KuppingerCole. Absolutely, they recognize that this is a validated identity market, verified identity market growth, reaching nearly $7 billion in just a few years time frame. And I think you can all imagine, and okay, if this is the growth rate, then there's a market also for this to be used. So these are the things. I'll just have a look here at this time. It looked great. So with that, I think I would just kind of start wrapping up a little bit on the presentation today. The first action, I think, is to establish your foundation. Validate digital identities is the foundation of all other cybersecurity measures, a fundamental factor determining the effectiveness and efficiency of everything else. Yeah, it's a bold statement, yes, I know that. Implement across. Cybercriminals don't care which way to enter. I've said that in many presentations. It doesn't matter where in the balloon the needle goes in. I think you can easily imagine what is the outcome of that needle, so they don't care. Lateral movement, all these techniques. Validated digital identities must be the only and single authorized way to identify and gain access across user groups, services and devices. Yet again, a bold statement, but keep that in your mind. Keep that as an option, saying, is this possible, or can we at least derive credentials out of my validated identities? And all means all. Just not a half of that or a quarter of that, or the important persons and non-important persons. Establishing a secure digital infrastructure with an end-to-end implementation of validated digital identities require a shared understanding of the gravity and needed actions. This applies to everyone, regardless of position or affiliation. Don't trust, always verify. And I think with all of that, the last thing I have to say today, before I can see if there are any good questions, is that you will find my contact details right here on the screen. You are most welcome to hook up with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or if you have any questions also, email me on that email account. So now we'll go here and have a look. Is there anyone asking any questions? And let me see. As you know, in the BrightTalk application, you can just click the question mark. And there are one question here. We are thinking about moving towards a zero trust model. Are validated identities a suitable method for this model? Very, very good question. I think those of you that have been studying zero trust would also know that zero trust is I would say a little bit hot air balloon also, but it's an important thing. I sometimes tend to call zero trust for what we call the German thinking. Nothing is allowed unless it is allowed. And I think having validated identities and always verify allows you as an organization to implement measures and processes where you can do that. So I think that's definitely a very good question. Let's see if there are more questions coming. I hope. I might not. Otherwise, you can always come back to my email account at ba@liga.com. I think. There was another one. Is it possible to use EIDs from different countries within the same organization? Oh yeah. So what do we do when we are in the middle of Europe and we have people coming from different countries or from different places in the world? Of course it is. That's the whole idea. You need to have a kind of a platform that can connect to all these EIDs and add them so you can have people from different places in the world. You could also, at the end of the day, I would say EID, as I mentioned, the legal binding identities can be a EID card or it can be a passport even. Maybe it's a bit clumsy if you need to use your passport every time you have to log into an IT system. But the passport could be a very nice way if you sell something that you might think, okay, this is involved in some heavy regulated areas like financial, or maybe, that depends, maybe you're selling goods of a very high value or selling airline tickets that are complicated. Stuff where you want to make sure that when I sell this, I definitely know who are the person buying this stuff or interacting with me from a business point of view, or someone requests that you changed your, let's say, banking address, you need to verify that. There can be many, many pieces in this conversation. So I think for any business that is able to run a digital process where you get a verification that you can trust and that is legal binding, you know, it's very hard not to underestimate the value of such an activity. So let's see if there's anything else. No. I think we are quite good. So with all of that, I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you for joining this session. And I truly hope that you had some good insights to how you can use validated identities in combination with cloud infrastructure. And always feel free to reach out to me and ask further questions. So thank you very much.